What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a minute since I have vlogged. A lot has happened since my last bump date. For example, I'm almost 3 weeks postpartum, 3 weeks with baby girl, and it has been a very crazy change for the last 3 weeks. But I wanted to use this video to talk about my birthing story, which took me some time to really think about and process on if I wanted to share it, because for me it was a little bit like traumatic. It wasn't like a beautiful, like empowering kind of experience for me. It was actually like the complete opposite. So I want to use this video to talk about that, and hopefully by sharing my experience it can kind of, you know, bring comfort to those who had a similar birthing experience as me, to help people not feel alone. If you're a new mom about to give birth and you think this is gonna like get in your head, don't watch it, because I definitely am not sharing this to like scare future moms. I'm just sharing my experience in hopes that it can make others feel like they're not alone. That's the main goal here. So we're gonna get started. So I started having contractions on September 18th around like 11:30 p.m. I actually had like early labor contractions the night before that, and we actually went into the hospital on the morning of 9/18. They said I'm not dilated. My cervix wasn't even forward facing. Like the chances of me going into labor were very slim. They sent me home. And then later that night, I started having these intense pains again, but they were not like the ones I had for early labor. Like these were like crazy different in pain. And that's how I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, like these are contractions. So that started happening around 11:30, 11:40 on September 18th. And then they continued on until about 5:30 to 6:30 a.m. I woke Wade up and I said, hey, like I've been having contractions all night. Like I think we need to go to the hospital soon. And I was timing them, and they were consistently anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes apart for that whole duration of that evening. So from 11:30, 11:40 till about 6-ish in the morning, they were staying in that time frame. And I wanted to stay at home until they were maybe 5 minutes apart or less. And that was the plan originally, and that's what the doctor said to do, is just wait until that point and then come in. And so I told Wade. Wade got up, he was showering, like we were just kind of like gathering ourselves, so whenever we needed to go, we could go. And then he witnessed one of my really intense contractions, y'all. Like they definitely were a level of pain that I felt like breathing wasn't entirely helping. I kept like hunching over and just like holding the wall, holding something like super firm and like trying to breathe through them. Like I've never experienced this kind of intense pain before. And Wade saw one where I literally was just like hanging onto the wall like this, and I was just hanging there like trying to breathe through it, and it was just a lot. And it lasted like a good 40 seconds, which these 30 to 40 second contractions felt like an eternity to me. It was crazy. And he witnessed one of those, and he was like, you know what, I don't care, we're gonna go in. Like, I've never seen you in this kind of pain before. Get your stuff, we're going. And so we got to the hospital, and I told him, I was like, I was just here yesterday morning, I'm back again, contractions are happening, I'm 99% sure. And I had 2 of them while I was doing my paperwork to get admitted into the hospital. And the person helping me check in like didn't seem like phased by it, which I'm sure she's in the labor and delivery wing, like she probably sees it all the time. But I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this all by myself, like what is happening? Because Wade wasn't there either. It was very awkward. I was just like keeled over in pain. She's asking me questions. I can barely think or even know my name while I'm mid contraction, and she's asking me questions. Like it was crazy. And so then they admitted me to a room where they wanted to check everything. And when the nurse came in, she said I was about 1 centimeter dilated at that point. Okay, so I was just already having contractions for a really long time. And for her to tell me I'm just 1 centimeter dilated, and I was like, oh my gosh, like these are so painful, and I'm only 1 centimeter, this is nuts. And so Wade and I stayed in that room for a few hours. The nurse left, came back to check on me. it said after like an hour and a half or so, she was like, okay, you're 2 centimeters dilated. And then she gave me kind of like an ultimatum kind of thing. And she said, if you don't progress further in the next hour or so when I check on you, I highly recommend you going home. Otherwise, the only way you could say is if you get an epidural and we admit you and we keep you here. And she left. I looked at Wade and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this at home. Like they were getting so intense in pain that I literally was just like, if I go home, I'm not gonna relax. I'm not gonna chill out. Like I'm gonna be in pain, wanting to go back to the hospital. It just doesn't make sense for me, because her idea of me going home was I'll be more relaxed at home. My contractions will get, I guess, quicker and I'll dilate faster because I'll be more relaxed. And I'm like, no, that's not, she doesn't know me. I'm gonna be an anxious wreck if I go home and have to come all the way back. So I was sitting there, and that's already going against part one of what I planned for my pregnancy. I wanted to do this all natural, because the entire time, you can ask any of my friends, I was like, I can do it. Like I have a high pain tolerance. I got this. Like I'm not worried. Like I was built for this. I was created for this. I can do it. And when she gave me that ultimatum, I literally had to sit there and pray on it. And I was just like, God, like why is this like my only option of just go home and be in pain or take the epidural and stay in the hospital? Why is this my only option? And I eventually picked, to get an epidural, because I was getting to the point in my contractions where I was just like, this is too much. Like I can't, there's no way that I'm gonna relax enough without the epidural for me to dilate more. It would just make my labor so much longer. So the nurse came back. I told her I'm gonna get the epidural, yada yada. So then they moved me to a labor and delivery room, which was super nice. Like it was way nicer than the testing waiting room. And so we got in there, and again, like my contractions were progressing. I told my mom like, hey, like I'm gonna get an epidural. They're admitting me. So my mom came. Wade's mom was there for a little bit. My dad came at one point. And the moment I got into that labor and delivery room and I was prepping myself mentally for this epidural, like everything kind of feels like a blur at that point, because so much happened between then and when I had baby girl. So I think I got into the labor and delivery room around like 9 in the morning, maybe 9:30. It took them like an hour or two to get the anesthesiologist, I think is who does it, to come to me and give me the epidural. And this is mistake number 2. And I say mistake because I would not do this again, and I would not recommend this to anybody. That's just my opinion. But they came in, they said, hey, I have a student, he's a senior. They asked, like, do you care if he does your epidural? And in the moment, I'm just like, give me the epidural. Like my contractions are hurting. I'm like sweating at this point. Like they were just getting worse and worse. And by the time they gave me the epidural, I think I was only like 3 or 4 centimeters dilated. So it was still progressing pretty slow. So I said, yeah, fine. Like I just need the epidural, like go ahead. And so 1, it took forever for him to do it. 2, it was a bit more painful than I thought it was gonna be. And they said, you should feel like one of your legs is numb as soon as he does it, and that's how you know it's gonna work. Well, neither of my legs were numb when he injected it. So we had to try again. And then like I still felt barely any tingling in any of my legs when he did it, but they put it in, said, give it a minute to like kick in, you'll be fine. They laid me down, and then it took like an hour and a half almost for the epidural to start kicking into one leg. So I'm still feeling my contractions. They're still super painful. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like this needs to be working. And then eventually the epidural kicked in. My contractions were a lot more bearable. They were watching the monitor and telling me like, this is a really intense contraction. Can you feel it? I'm like, no, like I feel fine. And so that went on for a few hours. And then they ended up giving me, I think they ended up giving me Pitocin at one point to kind of, okay, scratch that. They gave me Pitocin to kind of quicken my contractions because they were slowing down because the epidural, I believe, like made them slow down a bit. So they gave me Pitocin, and then they started getting faster. And then at about 6 to 7 centimeters dilated, I started feeling my contractions again. And I literally felt the numbness in my legs like just go away. And I was telling the nurses, like, I was getting in a lot of pain, and they were like, you shouldn't feel like this on an epidural. This isn't normal. Like, it's wearing off. We're so sorry. We'll get someone in to redo it. And they couldn't get someone in to redo it for a good hour and a half. So I was contracting quickly, really intensely for an hour and a half, to the point to where, like, between 5 centimeters and to when they got me that second epidural, like, I had my eyes closed the entire time. I was breaking weight in my mom's hand because I was in so much pain, and the nurses kept saying, like, we're so sorry, like, it shouldn't be this hard. At one point I was crying because I was like, this is so much, like, and my contractions were happening so fast that they had to take me off of Pitocin because they were like, your contractions are happening too fast, like, we're gonna give you a break, let's see if your body will, like, slow down if we take the Pitocin off. And it was probably the most grueling, painful hour and a half to 2 hours of my life with the contractions. One, I never had a break. I think I had maybe a 1 to 2 minute breather between every painful cycle, which means baby girl only had a 1 to 2 minute break between every contraction that I was having, which they eventually discovered was hurting her, which was, that was so sad to hear. But yeah, it was a mess. And another thing that I noticed too was that I, like, felt like I was bleeding a lot, like, especially because the epidural wore off. Like, I could feel everything down there. And so I kept telling the nurse, I was like, hey, like, I think I'm bleeding more than I'm supposed to. Like, I don't know if this is normal. And they did their best to reassure me, like, everything's fine. But I feel like I could tell, like, everything was not fine. Like, they seemed almost as stressed as I did, but they did a good job of keeping it together. But I still feel like they were as stressed out as I was. And so by the time I was seen by a second anesthesiologist, they got me a dude who's been there for a really long time. He's really great at epidurals, and he came in, did it so fast. I felt numbness immediately as soon as he put the stuff in my back, and it slowly started, like, wearing away. The pain and the contractions I was feeling them less and less. And by the time it fully kicked in, I think it took maybe like 30 minutes or so. So I still felt some contractions for a little bit after that, but it was a lot more bearable than when the epidural wore off. And so they put that in. It was chill. Everybody was having a moment to breathe. And it was also really tough because, like, my parents were there, and, like, it was supposed to just be Wade and my mom, but they all stayed because I was in so much pain that I think they just wanted to be there for me. And all of them said it was probably the hardest thing in the world to see me in that much pain and not be able to help. And they've never seen me like that before. Like, I have a high pain tolerance. I'm good at masking when I'm hurting, you know, like, not that that's something to brag about. I'm not bragging, but they are just not used to it. And so it was really hard on everybody to see me like that. And that was another, like, thing that if I could go back and maybe change it, I would, just because I don't like them seeing me in that kind of pain. But I literally was just not coherent enough to even say anything. Like, when I tell you my eyes were closed for hours, they were closed for hours. I couldn't even open them because I was just in that much pain that I needed to breathe and keep my eyes closed. I couldn't look at anybody. And yeah, so that happened. And then they tried to give me something before I got the second epidural. I can't remember what it was. I think it was something, I don't remember what it was, but they injected it and I felt my heart start. I think it was morphine. Actually, because I've had morphine before and it did this, but my heart started racing and I couldn't breathe. And I, like, looked at the nurse and I was just like, I don't like this. Like, I can't breathe. My heart hurts. Like, and I started crying again because I was like, what is happening? And Wade's like, are you okay? And I was like, I can feel my heart about to blow up out of my chest. And I had contractions going. Like, you guys, it was a disaster. I look back now and I'm just like, I don't know how I thought this would be so, like, beautiful for me. It was just so not beautiful for me. It was way too intense. But anywho, back to getting the second epidural. They gave it to me. I was feeling okay. They at one point started putting me in all these different positions in hopes that baby would move, because I hit about 8 centimeters of dilation, I think, and she wasn't really moving much. Like, they would check and they would say, like, I could feel her hair, I can feel her head, but, like, she's not in position to come out. And so they were doing that in hopes that she would shift, but every time they would put me on my left side, they noticed that her heart would start dipping. And with my contractions being so quick, even though I couldn't feel them at the time, she like had no time to basically rest in between, and so I couldn't lay on my left side at all. And the left side of my cervix is what wasn't like opening enough. So my right side was clear, my left side was not, and they were trying to position me in all these ways to make the left side just open up all the way so I can start pushing and get her out, and it just wasn't working. She hated it, and it was very stressful for them to shift me and watch the monitor and watch her heart, and to see them immediately put me in a different position because her heart rate was dipping so fast. Like, that was very stressful too. And I had to at one point ask like my mom and like Wade and stuff, like, don't tell me anything about the monitors, don't look at them, don't even tell me anything, because it's stressing me out, and I can't just let the nurses do their job. And that was stressful, just knowing that like I couldn't control my contractions, I couldn't make them slow down for her. Like, it was a lot. And at one point, the furthest I got was 9.5 centimeters dilated. I didn't get any further than that for like a couple hours, and I felt all this pressure. They said you're gonna feel pressure like in your butt pretty much, and then you'll eventually feel that pressure shift up to your hoo-ha where you'll push at that point. And so the pressure I felt from my butt was just like so intense. Like, it was not comfortable. And also, I forgot to mention, but for the from 7 centimeters dilated, or even 6 to the 9.5, like, I had tremendous body shivers, like to the point where my teeth were chattering. I had a ton of blankets on me, and I was shaking so much, like, and I couldn't control it. I couldn't stop it. Like, with every contraction, I just started shaking like terribly, and it just continued and continued, and it got worse and worse. Like, nothing was helping. And so that was going on. The pressure down there was intense. I felt like I could start feeling my contractions again. Like, everything was just really, 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 really intense for me. And I stayed at 9.5 centimeters for maybe like 2 hours, 3 hours. At this point, you guys, it's like 8 o'clock at night maybe. So I've been in there for almost a whole day, just going through this, like trying to figure out how they're going to get baby girl in position for me to push. And at one point they did have me push just to see if it would encourage her to come out. It did nothing. She didn't move. Nothing happened. And then at one point, the midwife that was there, she was on call. She like looked at everything, was watching the baby's heart, and she said, you know what, like, I'm gonna call the doctor. I'm gonna have him come in. And I feel like when they say I'm gonna call the doctor, like, you know, things are just kind of going downhill and it's not working and something's wrong. And so she said that, and my eyes like welted, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is going wrong? Like, why can't I just get my baby girl out? Like, why is this not working? And she called the doctor. I was still in a tremendous amount of pain, and I think that's why she called him, was because, like, she said, this amount of pain you're in is not normal. Her not moving and you not dilating anymore is not, like, ideal. And then she addressed my bleeding, which I knew. I was like, something is off. Like, I don't think this is supposed to be happening. And she brought up how, she basically phrased it as, I don't want to worry you by saying this is abnormal, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it because it's a lot more than what should be happening. And in my head, I immediately was like, so it's not normal and something's wrong, and I don't know what's happening, but something is wrong. And baby girl's heart rate was dropping again, and it was so, like, I've never felt so out of control in my life. Like, there was nothing I could do to make my pain better, to make it easy for baby girl to come. Like, nothing I could do, and nothing the nurses could do. Like, they gave me drugs that didn't make me feel good. My epidural was failing. Like, nothing was working. And you guys, when I tell you, like, I thought I was gonna have a natural birth that was just gonna be really, like, quicker than this and not as painful. Like, everything was the opposite of what I planned. And we'll get into that at the end. But the doctor came in, looked at me, looked at like my shaking and stuff, which immediately he saw my shaking, and he was like, how long has this been going on? told him, and he was like, okay, and he seemed like questioning that, and then he said, have you had an ultrasound since like you've been here? And I said, no. So they don't know what the baby looks like. They don't really know her position or anything. And he said, okay. And he brought up how her heart rate's dropping with the contractions. And he's like, honestly, like we're going to probably have to take you back for a C-section, because at the rate you're contracting, like naturally, my body was doing this naturally at this point. Like it was trying to push her out, and it wasn't working, because they took me off Pitocin a long time ago. So my body was naturally getting ready to deliver her, and she just wasn't moving because she was too tired. And he said, we're gonna have to do a C-section. Like, I just think that's what's best. And I literally, it was like the last thing that I wanted. Like I told Wade, I was like, look, like I'm not gonna be stubborn. If it's for the safety of me and baby, like I'm gonna do it. And that's basically what it came down to. He was just like, to safely deliver her, like we're gonna have to do this, because she's not moving, she's not in position, we don't know what she looks like in there, we're just gonna have to go in and get her. And I said, okay. They all left. I started bawling because I was like, this is not what I wanted, this is not what I planned, like, and I hate that she was in pain and there was nothing I could do. Like, I just assumed the worst, that she's like suffering in there. And I just started crying my eyes out. Wade was crying, and we both were like, you know what, like this is okay, like God's got us, like even if it's not according to plan, like it's gonna work, she's gonna be fine, she's gonna be healthy, we're gonna see her. And they were preparing me for the C-section. I'm still feeling pain, my contractions are still happening a ton, the pressure's still building up, like I'm still shaking profusely, like nothing got better at that point. And they prepared me for my C-section, wheel me to the back. I immediately started asking, like, I thought they were starting, and I was like, no, like, where's my husband? Like, I need my husband to be here. I can't do this without him. They bring him in. And then the C-section, I feel like I didn't feel anything really when they were doing it. I felt pressure, if anything, but everything was kind of smooth sailing. I like said ow a few times because I felt like it should have hurt, because I felt the pressure, and the anesthesiologist was like, do you really feel that? And I was like, no, I just feel pressure. And she's like, okay. My shaking was still going on. It was crazy, but they got her, they took her out, and I got to see her, and I just started crying my eyes out because I got to see her. She was breathing, she was crying, it was great. And then as soon as they moved her out of my line of vision, I felt like I was having a panic and anxiety attack. Like I kept twisting my head to look for her. I kept looking for her. I was like, no, I just want to see her. I want to touch her. Like I want to feel her. Like I just want to see that she's okay. And I started panicking. And then I think I got in my head about the C-section. Like I could feel pain even though I couldn't. Like I think I convinced myself that I could. And I felt the pressure of them like shoving everything back. And it was so intense, you guys, because I kept my epidural and just got more in me, thinking that was enough, because it was either that or like a spinal tap, I think, and I didn't want a spinal tap. I was like, I don't want this, like get out of my back, like just give me more whatever you need in the epidural and I'm gonna be fine. No, get the spinal tap. Do not do the epidural if you're getting a C-section, just don't. But the pressure was so intense that like my shaking got worse because I was having a panic attack, to where I heard the doctor say like she needs to be still, like somebody help her stay still. That made me panic even worse. I told Wade, I was like, I can't breathe. And then the anesthesiologist apparently was like, you can breathe, you're okay. I was freaking out. And so then she asked, like, do you want me to give you something stronger to knock you out? And I said, yes. Next thing I know, I'm waking up to them wheeling me into the recovery room. So I don't remember anything after that point, like the closing, nothing. They wheeled me into the next room. Wade said it was like a 15-20 minute thing later that they did that. And then I got to see baby girl, and everything has kind of been like, healing has been okay for the first like 6 to 7 days. Like I needed a lot of help with things, but after that whole experience, like Wade and I looked at each other and I was like, I don't really know if I'm gonna want a second kid after this, especially because I have to have a C-section from here on out. Like I can't really do it naturally anymore. And yeah, that was my really extreme birthing story, that it was all just not what I originally wanted or planned. And I think it's funny because I prayed on this a lot. Like I prayed on this delivery a lot, and it was the exact opposite of what I wanted. And I feel like God's funny in that way, because he knows like the plan for me, and he knows the story, and he knows what's going to happen, and he's there, and he's seen it. He's been in front of me, behind me, like he knows it all. And so after everything, I was just kind of like, wow, like God really said, you need to trust me. It's going to be worth it. This is how it's going to go. And it was really not cool, but looking back, I know that he had everything in his hands and he was in control of all of it, even though it was super painful and super traumatic, and I literally didn't enjoy any single part of my labor and delivery, didn't enjoy a single part of it. I know that I have my healthy Rayleigh, and she's beautiful and she's perfect, and you know, I think it also just goes to show that like you can go through an immense amount of pain and unplanned things and come out with something extremely amazing and beautiful, and that was baby girl. So yeah, that's what happened. And I know it was a really quick summary. I really think my brain is blocking out a lot of it because it was so traumatic for me, but that was it. So if you guys had anything similar to that and you didn't love your labor and delivery and it was really hard on you, you're not alone. Not everybody has the magical, like empowering, womanly, I pushed my baby out and it was amazing. Not everybody gets that, sadly. But yeah, I feel kind of good talking about it. I didn't cry, so that's good, but I hope this is helpful for people. The next YouTube video is going to be a Q&A. I put up a question box on my Instagram and you guys asked a lot of really good questions, so I'm excited to film that. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe so you don't miss the Q&A, comment below if you want to share your birthing story, and I'll catch you guys next time.